do a roll call so we're official. I will say your name, and if you are here, state your name and say you're here. Tim Davis, here. Tom Norton.
Here.
Sean Keneally, not here. Harbor Master, Lori Gibbon, not here. Susan Bryant, not here. Lisa Hewitt.
Here. Lisa Hewitt here.
Thank you. Matt Marr. Matt Marr. Matt, I know you're here.
He looks like he might,
Matt.
he looks like he's frozen maybe.
Paula Curran.
Paula Curran here.
Thank you, Paula. Barbara Canny.
Here.
Matt Marr.
Matt, it might help if you turn your video off. It might make your connection better.
Matt, turn your video off. Well, Matt?
I'm here.
You're here. Okay, you're here. We have a quorum.
Yes.
These are such fun. Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Lauren, what do you want to do? Do you want to turn it over to me and leave? What is your plan?
Well, I can stay for a bit. I have to be I have 5:30 that I have to hop off
Well,
at.
we'll be done by 5:30,
Okay.
I can assure you.
Okay.
Okay. The first item on the agenda was to approve the minutes from our last meeting. May I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Get minutes?
So motion, yeah, didn't we? Didn't we get
We
that?
can, except every time I try to upload the minutes, I can't find any. I'm sorry, but
Well, I sent
I'm
them out.
on Agenda
I sent them out
Center.
to everybody. Okay, so nobody has them.
We can vote for them, and if we need corrections at another meeting, we can do so. Okay.
Can I hear
Yeah, so I move to approve the second Paula's amendment,
At first.
motion to approve.
What was the amendment?
I said,
No. If there was future amendments to be made, is that what you said, Lisa?
yeah.
But we're voting to approve them with the condition that if there were future ones to be made, we could.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
What I will do, thank you very much. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Was that an oppose or was that an aye? Tom?
Aye for me.
I think it was a
I was an
delayed.
aye. That
Oh,
was a Matt.
okay.
Matt was an aye. It was a late aye, but I'm an aye. We're all ayes.
Okay. All right. I will send out the draft minutes either tonight or tomorrow, so you can all take a look at them again.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda was a brief review of the Seaport grants. Let me see where. There somewhere. Anyway, there are two
Sean
Seaport
seems to be-
grants.
I think Sean has joined us.
What?
I believe Sean has joined us.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Sean. I will.
Sorry that I just had a little trouble linking up, but all good.
Okay, so I will put you on here as joining. Okay. The Seaport grants, there were two Seaport grants that have recently been approved. One is for the continuing engineering for the Parker Avenue boat ramp. I don't know if you remember, but we had gotten to the point where we had asked the engineer, Carlos Pena, to look at an alternative to the cofferdam approach, which is constructing the ramp, as they say, in the dry. You have to put the cofferdam up, pump it out, and construct the ramp that way. He is still working on getting bids on doing it in the wet, which means no cofferdam. I'm encouraging him to continue to do that. In the meantime, we have the money for the engineering from the Seaport Council. So that will continue on. I think that it would be prudent for us to at least have a bid or an estimate or somebody who is knowledgeable to say what it would cost us if we did it in the wet. What would we get from doing it in the wet? Many ramps are done that way. In fact, I think this original one was probably done without cofferdams. So anyway, that's ongoing. The hope is once we get the engineering complete, we will then find the money. We'll have to go seek the money either through another Seaport grant. CPC has indicated they might be interested in working with us, and of course the town itself through the capital budget. But it would be nice to find at least most of that through grants in one place or another. It is going to be expensive. I've seen numbers in the $500,000 to $600,000 range. So we're going to need to find money for that. The other one, next one that we got a grant for was for the Government Island Piers. And many of you may recall, we've looked at a number of different alternatives for lift systems. And while we were in that discussion, it was made clear that we had to get a permit from a Chapter 91 permit, and this will help us get the permit and also do some engineering studies for an addition to the float system and a lift system as well. As these drawings come about, as these proposals come about, I want to make sure that the fishermen, Matt, are aware of what's going on and can weigh in on the design. But the Harbor Committee will get those as well. I have one sketch that I got a couple of days ago, which I will send out in the next day or so you can take a look at what Carlos is looking at. He's seen some other pier and dock and lift systems that he thinks work very well. But I think it's important that the commercial fishermen see it as well. So Matt, if you can work with me to make sure that they are in the loop here as we move forward, I'd appreciate that very much.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, yes. Yeah, that was all part of my proposal, to make sure that the fishermen, that if we do make something, make sure we do it with the fishermen in mind and what works for them. I hadn't heard that there was money approved until just when I read it in the Mariner the other day.
Yeah.
And I had talked to the harbor master, and she said there was some sort of a design being discussed or being processed, and I was surprised by it because I wasn't aware of it at that point.
She said something, what was being processed?
She said that they were drawing up a design for a new pier.
No, there's some sketches, and I will get those out, the ones that I have anyway. I mean, we've seen a number of different ones. When was it, last fall or last winter when we were first talking about this pre-COVID, there were a number of different drawings, and I think you probably saw those. This one is different, and so I will get those to you, and if you can make sure the fishermen see it as well. The other thing I want to talk to you about, Matt, and we can do this again offline, is there is some interest, and I think you responded to this, there is some interest to setting up a deep water aquaculture operation. And it would be great if some of the current commercial fishermen would be interested in doing that. So we can talk a little bit more about that, but that's something down the road a bit.
Yeah. Tim,
Yeah.
I think at this point, we should thank both Tim and Lauren and the harbor master for the hard work on getting that, those grants. That's huge. I mean, especially in a very competitive time right now for resources. So thank you. I think that's great work, and we appreciate all your hard work on that. The other comment I would make is I think I certainly, and I bet a bunch of other members of the Harbor Committee would be interested in hearing about the deep water aquaculture proposal that's been talked about a little bit, at least in broad terms, especially in light of the other questions of, the oyster fields, et cetera. So if we could schedule that for another meeting, I'd love to.
It's not, there really is not much to report other than there are people who are interested in doing it. I am particularly interested in helping it in any way I can because one of the issues that we're wrestling with is the relationship between Scituate and Cohasset. And I wanted to make clear to Scituate and any of the people in Scituate who listen that Cohasset is not against aquaculture. In fact, it's in our harbor plan is saying this would be good for Cohasset. So I'm going to do whatever I can to facilitate a deep water aquaculture project. And as you say, Lisa, I can talk more about this at another time. I did talk to Leslie Ann McGee, who is a scientist at Woods Hole, grew up in Cohasset, and is on retainer to Cohasset as a consultant for aquaculture. And she was very encouraging about how that might happen. But anyway, more on that later.
Great, thank you.
You bet. Okay, just a little bit about the lighting in the Cove area. A number of you may recall we've had discussions about that, different types of technologies. We actually, at one point, got a bid from a lighting company on doing an LED lighting system for the Cove area. It was very expensive. So basically we, and I say this is the kind of expansive Cohasset, we tabled it. We went through a number of different trials. We turned on the light on Margin Street, and we turned on the light on Border Street by the Salt House. The light on Margin Street was very intrusive to the neighbors. And to make a long story short, what we did is we turned that one off, re-aimed the light by the Veterans Memorial, and that seems to be working okay. The main thing we're trying to do is light the dock area over on Margin Street, because at night, if people are using that dock, it's dangerous because of there's no lighting there at all. One of the things that I think we should do, and depending on the structure of the implementation of our harbor plan, we should have a working group that works with the neighbors over the winter to come up with a suggestion for lighting in that area that works for both safety and security for the harbor, and also is not intrusive to the neighbors. I have talked to the owners of the Cohasset Harbor Inn, and depending on what happens with that development, they are very interested in working with us to make sure that we have lighting that works for the Cove area in the harbor, and also works for, they will then have residents there. So we want to make sure that we're respectful of what's going on there. But anyway, that's just a brief update on lighting. At least for now, we have, the neighbors are reasonably pleased with where things stand, recognizing that it is short term. It'll go through this boating season, and then hopefully we'll have a better plan next spring. Does anybody have any questions at this point? I'll just pause on any of the topics that I've raised.
Can I say something, Matt, Tim?
Of course.
Is there lighting at the dock at the Salt House, or at the Town Landing dock? Is there lighting there?
On which dock?
Town Landing? next to the salt house?
Well, there is one light that's there on the salt house, or by the salt house, between the dock and the salt house. And frankly, I've not been down there at night to observe it. But
Yeah, I haven't either.
at one point, I think you and some of the other fishermen said that it was on and it was operating, it was working well.
Yeah, that's debatable, but I'm not absolutely sure of that. But,
Okay, well, would you check on it for me, Matt, with the fishermen? I was talking to Adam Donovan the other day. I should have asked him as well, but because he operates out of there. But if you could just check and just get me some assessment of how that one is working or not, as the case may be, because we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, on to the next one, which is really how we can best go about implementing all of the various suggestions, recommendations, projects that are touched on in the harbor plan. There are, if you count them up, there are probably 20 or 25 separately identified projects that will have timeframes from maybe 6 to 12 months to some that will take 10 years. Some will be relatively easy to fix. Others will take a lot of coordination with town, state, and federal agencies. Like, for instance, the breakwater. That is not going to be a 6-month slam dunk. Let's build the breakwater. That is going to take a lot of effort, a lot of work to get that done satisfactorily. There are projects like dredging, for instance, which every harbor in Massachusetts needs to be dredged from time to time. Cohasset has been dredging for at least longer than I've been here, probably almost 100 years since I've been here. And the way it currently works is that when one or more of the commercial fishermen run aground in the channel, they tell the harbor master that they're running aground in the channel, and the harbor master starts putting together a plan to dredge. Now, that's overly simplistic, and I'm sure there's more to it than that. But there are many ways to approach this, and what I think we really need to do is some research on how other harbors are doing it, and put together a plan that has funding attached to it, so we can plan ahead and know exactly what has to happen. Some of the parts of the harbor have to be dredged more often than others. Some parts of the harbor have to have the moorings removed to dredge. So there are many different aspects of it. But these are just a few of the projects that I'm mentioning. And what I'm suggesting and asking for all of you to consider is how best to effectively and efficiently implement the projects that we have here. I'm sure you know that the municipal master plan was completed, and once that was completed, a whole new committee, the master plan committee, sunsetted, if you will, and a new committee called the Master Plan Implementation Committee was set up and started specifically to implement the priorities of the master plan. That looks like it's working. It seems to be an efficient way to do it. What I had proposed is a structure that is taken directly from that, so it's very similar to that. One of the things that it does, whatever the committee is, the implementation committee, once the priorities are set, and the priorities are set not just with individuals on a committee, but really in consultation with the community, what are the priorities in the harbor plan that we really need to focus on first, second, third, fourth, and so forth. Some can be done in concert with each other. Others have to be done separately and independently. But there's a lot to be done there. Once the priorities are all set and we know where we're going, then there are working groups that are put together that have people and these working groups can be anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 people, depending on the project, who are willing to roll up their sleeves and attack the particular issue, whether it's the lighting in the cove or the dredging or Government Island or whatever it may be. And so that's kind of the structure. I personally have no preconceived notion as to where that structure is. I talked to Lauren and Chris Sr. the other day. There was some suggestion that it might fall under the Master Plan Implementation Committee. It could fall under the existing Harbor Committee. It could be an independent, totally independent standalone committee. But my only suggestion is that we have such a committee that's got a new charter, and that charter is implementing. Right now, the Harbor Committee does not have the charter to implement the harbor plan. So there is no committee that has a charter. So this would be a new committee that would be set up specifically for that. And let me just finally, before I open this up for discussion, any committee that is set up would be set up under the Massachusetts state open meeting laws. So any committee that would be set up would be advisory only. It would not be a decision-making body. It would be advisory ultimately to the select board. It could advise along the way. It could advise to the Harbor Committee. It could advise to the Master Plan Implementation Committee. It could advise to the Planning Board, depending on what it is. But it's an advisory committee, and it's open to anyone who wants to participate. The reason to have a formal structure is so that we can have official meetings, have a quorum, and documentation for the town and for the community as it moves forward. So I will take a breath from there, and if anybody has any comments, I'd be very interested in hearing them.
Tim, I think Laurie tells me she needs to be unmuted because she was trying to comment on the lighting in the harbor. I don't know if you can unmute her.
I can't do anything with her. I don't have the.
Well, who has the, is it Lauren then?
Yeah, I can't unmute people. I can ask her to unmute. She should get a prompt that the host is requesting
Okay.
her to unmute.
Okay.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, there you go. I know she had a question about the lighting or something.
Lori, are you there?
Seems
Laurie?
like she's.
No, well, Lori, if you have a question about it, you're welcome to contact me offline if you'd like, or if you have any point about it, if you send it to me, I'll make sure everybody is aware of it. Okay. Any comments on the implementation of the harbor plan?
Tim, Matt Mark talking.
Yep.
Okay, we have these different implementation committees. They're strictly advisory. So is it so? I mean, how is it structured? Who do we give our advisements to, and who makes the decisions on what's going to be funded or what's going to be implemented?
Well, ultimately, these committees are advisory to the select board. The same way the Harbor Committee is an advisory committee to the select board. In terms of funding, certainly each of these working groups would be charged with the responsibility of finding the funding for their particular project. And there are many different sources of funding, as you know. I mean, the Seaport Council is but one. There are several others. The governor has a whole program for dredging that has funding to it. You know, there are plenty of sources for funding, but the funding, to find the funding would be the responsibility of the working group. The decision to move forward with any of these would be the select board.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you, Matt.
Hey,
Yeah.
Tim, I don't quite understand. So who, okay, just for example, say Matt was taking care of the docks. Say Government Island, he wanted to be in charge of that. Is he in charge of that, or is somebody else in charge of that? And then you go to the selectmen and I don't understand.
Okay. Let me see if I can run through the way.
Give me, yeah,
The way it's structured, with the master plan, and let's just take an example, which is one that is a project that is recommended by both the master plan and the harbor plan, and that is Elm Street. So the master plan implementation committee has formed a working group
okay,
for Elm Street. That working group consists of people that have specific expertise in what has to be done there. We have one of the town engineers is on that. We have somebody from planning that's on that. We have a citizen at large who is an architect who is on that. And certainly the public safety will be part of that, whether they're ex officio or an actual member. That's I don't recall. But that committee is then charged with investigating the possibilities for the Elm Street corridor. And that has to do with, you know, working with the highway department, the utilities department, public safety, the neighbors, working with the owners of the Cohasset Harbor Inn to make sure that there's a view corridor that goes down into the harbor, working with the historical commission, Jackie Dormister, to make sure the Captain's Walk is appropriately designed and built. So all of those different things working together, but
Yeah.
they don't, that group does not have a source of funds themselves, nor do they have the authority to do anything. But what they would do is they would develop this plan, this recommendation to be recommended to the select board. And hopefully, if they do their job the way I would expect they would identify sources of funding. They would have the support of the various constituent groups, in this case, the neighbors on Elm Street and Elm Court, the support of public safety, which is critical on Elm Street, pulling all that together. So when the select board gets it, whether it's 1 page or 15,
yeah,
it's all there. And the select board just has to say, ask its questions, say, this sounds like a great idea, we approve it, go forth and conquer, or here are some of the critical problems, go back and find them and come back to us when it's done. Lauren, you're an expert on this. Does that kind of outline the way that's going to work?
Right, I think that's a good explanation. What the intent of these sort of working group style things with any of these committees is that there's so many members on, particularly, for example, the Harbor Committee, you know, and it's like, there's all these initiatives, there's just simply not enough time and bandwidth to address them in your regular meetings. And, you know, to add on a bunch of more meetings, some people just don't have the time or maybe don't have the interest in whatever specific item it is. So this will allow people in between what your normal committee meetings would be to get together, collaborate, work. The meetings would be open to anybody else. They're open to the public. They'd be similar to this, but it would just be a smaller group that can get things done to keep momentum moving in the meantime.
I got you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Yeah, it does. But where do you find the people for like to work on the breakwater? I mean, that's got to be really skilled people.
I'm going to give you that assignment, Barbara. I don't know where we'll find them, but we won't know until we start looking.
Mhm.
Lauren, how do you think that this new configuration overlaps with the master plan implementation? Because the example Tim gave was a standing committee of the master plan implementation committee, which seems to be also, an agenda out of the final harbor committee report. How do you see that overlap between the harbor, the master plan implementation committee, which seems to be very well structured and have a lot of resources and a lot of, great leadership, in addition to, any role the harbor committee may have, this present entity versus this third new harbor plan implementation committee? I'm just trying to see how they all hang together.
Right, I think that's a good question. Oh, hold on, before I answer, there's someone in attendees. This might be Lori. Anyway, I've promoted them so they can speak to. Lori, is that you?
Yes, it is.
All right, we have Lori.
Hi, Lori. We have Lori. Okay. Thank you. I will
Okay,
I'll mark you down as being attending, Lori. Thank you.
thank you.
Do you want
Sorry,
me to
Lori.
do that, Lauren?
I'm sorry. Do you want to get back to Lori? Or do you want me to answer Lisa's question?
Oh, does Lori have something?
No, all I was going to say is when you were talking about the lighting down at Town Landing, the light does an excellent job lighting that dock.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lori. Thank you. That's and as far as I know, the neighbors have been appeased. I haven't heard any complaints.
No, I'm talking about the light over at Old Salt House.
Right.
The light that they turned on at the Veterans Memorial does absolutely nothing.
Does nothing. Well, when you say does nothing, is there any light on the dock over there on Margin Street?
Nope, it's totally dark.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
No wonder the neighbors are happy.
Really?
Very happy.
They took it out with a BB gun.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate the information. Back to the drawing boards, I guess. Okay. Lisa, to try to answer your question, I think there will be coordination, and one of the suggestion is that, and I know that everybody who has a committee in Cohasset would like to have Lauren be on that committee, but she can't be on all the committees. But I certainly think that there needs to be for the whatever the master plan or the harbor plan implementation committee is, it needs to have representation from town employees that are critical, planning, engineering, finance in some cases. Certainly Michelle Leary and procurement has been very helpful in a number of things. Now, whether these are permanent members of the committee or whether they are just made aware of and kept apprised of the activities, I don't feel dogmatic about it one way or the other. There is, but the hope would be that the harbor plan implementation structure would be similar to the master plan implementation structure. And you, I think, said rightly that it is, the way that is structured is very good, very solid. I don't think it has any financial resources per se, but it does have a number of people that are working hard to implement the master plan. And it certainly has very good leadership in Katie Dugan to drive that. So my hope is that whatever we come up with in this context will be similar. and again, it's going to be open to everybody, so there should be no surprises in terms of where we're going with this. There will be public forums if anything that to be done within the harbor that requires that. There'd certainly be public forums, and people will see what's going on. So I don't know if I can answer it any more than that at this point. At least I do know that the Master Plan Implementation Committee was a long time in getting itself structured, and that's one of the reasons it was vetted enough. One of the reasons I used it as a template. Now, if there may be a better way to do it, but that's where that came from. Any other thoughts, questions, ideas?
So what do you see the role, and I think it's not just a question for Tim, I think it's a question for all of us. What do we see the role, ongoing role of the Harbor Committee being as far as the next steps? You know, Tim rightfully identified the fact that there's many projects. And from what I saw, the draft that was Tim circulated, there was really only one member of the Harbor Committee would be part of this new implementation committee. So I'm just trying to figure out, you know, what is the role, or is there any role going forward further? And I'd be really interested in other members' thoughts on that.
Lisa, it seems to me that the implementation committee from the Harbor Committee should be working in conjunction with the master plan. You know, the town master plan should be prioritizing projects throughout the town. You know, and then within the harbor, certain projects that have priority over others. That's the way I see it. I mean, we should to be operating separately from the master implementation committee. I don't think it would be very productive. Can anybody hear me? That
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Matt, that you said it, because I was thinking, when I was looking at the master plan implementation, shouldn't the next step where they have a harbor master plan part of their agenda, wouldn't that be then the place? I mean, they've already started with the Elm Street, piece of it. Wouldn't that be with working groups through that, maybe made up of us, maybe made of other people? What is the next step? Most of us are appointed for another year or so, so does this mean we've got roles, or if it doesn't? And I'm not arguing either way. I'm just trying to understand. I'm a systems person. I like to see how systems interplay. And in my professional career, I deal with a lot of different groups. And unless that scope of responsibility is defined, then it's gets pretty muddy.
I agree.
So what are you recommending? Do you have a recommendation for how this gets done? I mean,
well, what I'm asking, I don't know, Tim. I know I hate coming to a meeting and not having a recommendation if you haven't, but I don't want this to be seen as an objection. It's just, we've never had this conversation as a committee. And that's why
we did it. We had this exact same conversation at the last meeting. And that's why we're having this conversation, so that we could all think about it and think about how it might work. So I have proposed one structure, and we can consider that a straw man. And if there are other structures that are better, I'd love to hear them. I think we all have the same objective, which is to implement the various suggestions on a priority basis of the harbor plan. So that's what our objective is. How do we best do it? We don't do it by having the whole harbor committee once a month come together and sing Kumbaya. I mean, that just doesn't work. We've got to have groups that are going to work, rolling up their sleeves. Maybe they come back once a month. Maybe they come back in 6 months with a the results of what they've been working on. But it just it just is not. We need to have a structure that's going to allow this to get done. That's my only. That's my only.
I agree with you, Tim. I'm just trying to identify the role of the people who are sitting here going forward. You know, in July of last July, you know, you proposed an organizational structure, and I know, you know, you talked to people about joining different groups. I mean, would that still be in play? Was that on you know, not workable, or?
Well, I didn't get a lot of response, Lisa. So
How do we reach out? How do we reach out?
What's that?
How do we reach out to get other people involved? It can't just be, there's only 6 of us here. We've got to reach out to other people, and how do we do that? I mean, you've got a couple of things already rolling. You know, if you want to make it formal, like who are those people on that committee, or are we just all kind of giving input, like on the lighting and on the docks, and
I know.
you know,
I mean,
so who's in? Somebody has to be in charge of each one, doesn't? So
part of the issue is that we do need to get people to provide some leadership in some of these these groups. Otherwise, it's not going to get done.
right.
And
May I offer
again,
just thoughts? Sorry.
what's that?
Just when you have a moment, I could just offer some thoughts to be considered.
I missed that, Lauren. What'd you say?
I just said I just wanted to offer you some thoughts if you would like my input, my 2 cents.
Very much interested.
Thank you. I just, in seeing a lot of these committees form and having a lot of dialogue on the back end about how they're structured, you know, I think at the end of the day, you know, as Tim explained earlier, you want to see what's efficient and effective, and nobody wants to just have meetings just to meet. And I think defining roles is going to be really important. And one of the things that I think would be helpful is if the Harbor Committee could sort of look at I mean, people only have so much bandwidth. If you can categorize your sort of top couple of items that you want to address, that's really what the Master Plan Implementation Committee did, is they looked at all of the goals and strategies, and they started meeting with different stakeholders and kind of picking out of all of these chapters and subjects, what are the top 2 things that we can accomplish this year? What are the most important, you know, what are the kind of burning priorities? And they kind of structure it that way. And then what they did was they went to the select board with their top 5 and said, these are where we think our priorities are. So I think if the Harbor Committee wanted to kind of collect their thoughts amongst that and figure out their top priorities for the next year or 2, and then, you know, talk to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, because that group is there to be a resource and kind of help bridge the gap between, and the more publicity you kind of have between the master plan and the select board, you may get people from the public who are interested in participating on a small working group basis. And then what I might suggest is that, you know, this sort of implementation group, wherever this goes, can then report back to the larger Harbor Committee, but the Harbor Committee can still exist. You're still going to want to meet, and there's different stakeholders and opportunities that you'll want to touch base on, but you don't need to meet every month. Maybe it's you meet, but, you know, every other month you have a standing meeting, and, you know, the small working group committees report back then. That way it's more of a defined role, and there's expectations, and people know when and where they should be.
Okay, I'm not entirely clear on what your recommendation is here, Lauren. I mean, you talked about the Master Plan Implementation Committee and the Harbor Committee, and then you're doing.
I think first we need a list, like a priority list, and who should make that. I think right now, right.
There are 9 priorities.
Okay, so from that, then decide how you want to structure. Is it one working group that can accomplish all of these things? Do you think you need 2, 3?
No,
and then with that, you go to master plan and select board and say, these are what we've identified. How do you think you can help us structure this? Because that's what master plan did to the select board. And then the select board took their feedback and incorporated almost all of them into their goals for this next fiscal year. And then that was the direction to the town staff and the other boards and committees. This is what we want you to start to move on. So if there's things that, you know, for example, one of the goals for the year that the select board picked was, you know, infrastructure. If there's something that could be added that you feel is not being addressed, you say the Harbor Committee wants to, you know, could you include this in your goal? It's like you need to kind of get the buy-in there. But if you say you already have your priorities, I think that just needs to be a larger conversation with those other 2 groups.
Lauren, what is the mandate? Maybe this is where I'm confused. What is the mandate of the master plan implementation committee? Is it to implement all of them, or is it just they're trying to start and it's going to be a 20-year campaign? I mean, that's where I'm a little confused about the overlap.
Right. So the Master Plan Implementation Committee, it's intended to carry out the goals and strategies in the implementation chapter of the Master Plan. Whether or not all of those things happen, that's sort of to be figured out as we move forward. You know, some of them, people might disagree with some of the agreements there, but I think the goal is to have an organization to vet out what the priorities are and how we can make meaningful motion on that.
It seems to me like you've already got so many of these overlap. If you've already got just 3 groups that to me that look like, besides Elm Street, which is over here, you've already got 3 groups out there working. And then if you leave the dredging and the breakwater, the dredging isn't an every year thing, is it?
No, it's not.
No.
Okay, but no need to solve the problem. And then there's a bunch of stuff for ecology and environmental protection. There's the Gulf River, the pollution that needs to be addressed. So okay.
Maybe we should get the list.
All right, I give up. What we'll do is this. I will send out a note to the Harbor Committee asking for their priorities. There are probably 35. I will probably come up with 35 different projects. And so everybody look at the harbor plan, come up with your priorities, and then we'll have another meeting.
Tim, can I suggest that we look at the document that you put on the website, the town website, about the organizational structure of the subcommittees? And it appears that, I presume, even though it was done in June, it still reflects the recommendations. Do you remember that?
Not sure which one you're talking about, Lisa.
Yeah, it's on the website. It's called Potential Organizational Structure of Cohasset Harbor Committee Subcommittees.
Okay.
By governance, government island, government, and resiliency. And it appears to have various subcommittees, sub issues that seem to be thought out in good buckets. And maybe that would be a way to structure it if this is the way we want
That's
to
another
go.
way to do it. I mean, that was the initial way that I was envisioning moving forward with this. But as I say, I got very little response to that. And so that's why what I'm looking for is response, and I guess I've gotten response. So now we'll move along. And then I've got some other things that I will do on the side that will hopefully keep the commercial fishing fleet from cratering while we're considering the priorities. But why don't I do that? I'll send out a memo asking for everybody to review the harbor plan and come up with their priorities, and then we'll try to put them in little boxes.
Yeah.
Tim,
Yeah.
Tim, we worked on this for 3 years, and we came up with priorities that we thought were very important. And we had public comment, and we had meetings and more meetings, and we came up with priorities. We have priorities; they're all written down. There's 9 priorities right there.
No, those are the 9, Matt. Those are the 9 goals.
Well,
those are not priorities. Those are 9 goals. Each one of them have subsections.
So the number 1 priority was to support the commercial fishing fleet. Is one priority. So
that's
a starting point. I mean, should we start there, or should we start at the Elm Street?
Matt,
yeah. Go ahead.
That is a goal. That was our number 1 goal. That everybody felt that was our number 1 goal, is to preserve the fishing fleet. But what does that mean? Think about what that means. It is not simply one priority, because that's huge. Supporting the commercial fishing fleet includes government island lift systems, dredging, you know, you go on down the list.
I understand that, though.
So, you know, it's not 9, it's, as I say, they're about 35. So please, I will send this out, please look through those and come up with your priorities. We can't do all the priorities at once. They can't all be #1 priorities. So, but we need to, obviously, we're going to have to do this and see where we go. So I'll send something out. We'll take a look at it. And if you have further thoughts, please let me know. In the meantime, it's almost 5:30 and I know Lauren's got another place to go, and it's my cousin, Mr. Balvini is waiting for me with a glass downstairs.
Took me a minute to what you were talking about.
There's
Got
only,
it, cousin.
there's only so much fun you can have.
Yeah.
So any other questions? Anybody have any other thoughts before we adjourn? Good. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. You will hear from me. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tim.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.